Hi, everyone. This is a recording of the presentation made on how to achieve your best transition to the Tri Club on Thursday. So hopefully, if you didn't make it, this would be something of use inside the presentation. So you're very welcome. Okay, so I want to start with the idea that transitions represent free speed. So let me just take a moment to increase the size here. So hopefully you can see what we're talking about. So the idea here is that the shorter the triathlon, the more important are the transition times. So for example, if you're taking 3 minutes between T1 and T2 changes in a sprint triathlon, that's likely to be 3 minutes over something like 90 minutes. Which is obviously sort of 3 or 4% of the total time. And because the distance kind of doubles to standard distance or to middle distance, then you can imagine that you wouldn't have to spend very much more time in transition for those longer races, but they hugely less effect proportionally. So if you're in a sprint then, or a super sprint even, these become very much more important. Also, you've done all the training. So think of the work that you put into cycling and to running, and in particular to swimming, particularly for a 500-meter swim. Massive amount of investment and training. So why would you ignore those 3 minutes and see if you could perhaps take 30 seconds or a minute off that total time? And on that same vein, if you were to work at where you'd get a minute from either on the bike or on the run, you might have to increase your power output on the bike by 2 or 3%. How long would it take you? Probably months to increase your power output by 2 or 3%. So simply by practicing and getting good at transitions will give you that overall increase in speed. So it's also part of the attraction of the sport. So there's skills to learn here, and by being skillful and masterful in what we do gives us a greater sense of achievement to master. So it just goes with the territory. So what are we talking about here? What are the terms when we talk about transitions? Well, really, it's T1 is the transition from the pool to the bike. T2 is the transition from bike to run. There's also a technical term called the mount-dismount line, which is basically that junction onto the access road out from the pool car park onto the first access road that leads onto the A816. So a line across there will be marshaled and it'll be laid out, and that will be the line that you cross over between where transition ends and where the rest of the world begins. The phrase closed transition means that transition will close. Some triathlons have an open transition, which you can kind of move in and move out during the course of the competition. In the Mid-Argyll triathlon, the transition will shut maybe 10 minutes before the race briefing. And so you'd better have it set up appropriately and with everything you need in there before it closes. And you'll probably have to wait for a certain amount of time before you can take your equipment, your bike out. It will remain closed during the course of the competition, or for most of it at least. Also, a clean transition. So clean transition means that it's usually space limited, which is definitely the case for us. And it means no bags, no boxes, no clutter, basically. So it wants to be as minimalist as possible. And the other thing we'll talk about is a tri-suit. So what you wear is really important. And there obviously is designed suits for triathlon, which come in 1-piece or 2-piece designs. And they are very helpful to the whole concept, so that you're doing the whole race, you swim in it, you bike in it, you run in it. and you don't need to put anything else on top of it, so that it makes it really smooth to go through. So if you think about that, you know, normal swimming trunks, and then having to get into cycle gear, and then having to get into run gear, you can imagine how you're leaking time out. So a tri-suit is saying, I'm wearing the same thing all the way through. So those are kind of the technical terms that we might come across. The rules of the sport are very simple, and not the key ones anyway, not complicated. So when you come out of the pool, you don't touch your bike unless your helmet is on and fastened. So that is an important aspect. You risk either a penalty or even a disqualification if you're moving through transition with an unfastened helmet, for example. So just assume that your helmet is on and fastened before you touch your bike, and certain things will flow from that. You can run with your bike in transition. You need to be careful, but yes, you can do that. Don't unfasten or remove your helmet until your bike is racked. So the reverse of the first part, put your bike away into the racking and then remove your helmet. Or again, you risk a penalty for not doing that. Race numbers, you'll be given race numbers, probably 2 race numbers, which could go on the front of your run gear if you have not got a tri-suit. And basically the idea here is that you must have a number on your front when it's on the run section, but on your back for the bike. So the way to make sure you do this with ease is a race belt, because you attach one number to your race belt and then you just swap it round. You swizzle it round so that it faces the front or faces the back. You can't mount the bike until you cross the mount line. So until you leave transition, you must be in control of the bike, but not actually riding it. Once you get across the mount line, you're free to go. But in transition, you are on foot with the bike. And of course, the reverse is true. You can't enter transition, come back into T2 unless you've dismounted the bike by the time you reach the dismount line. So those are the rules, really, and they're mostly about not cycling in within the transition area and being safe in terms of always ensuring you have a helmet on and the helmet fastened. So rules of the race. So this is what was in front of all of us. And as we said, this is a clean transition design. And as you can see, it's really quite cluttered, is what that looks like to me, because there's the bikes are quite close together and so on. So it's not a lot of space. But you will notice there's a cone, and we used to call that the cone of destiny. You had to kind of run around that cone on your way in or way out. But that cone says no kit bags, no boxes or plastic bags in transition. So don't be bringing, cardboard boxes or plastic boxes, etc., in, or the marshals will remove them and ask you to take those away. Notice there are some helmets which are hanging from the handlebars. So a clean transition is a transition with no kit bags, no boxes, no plastic bags. And as we've talked about, it's also a closed transition. So making sure that you have everything set up in really good time. Okay, so what are the choices that are in front of you as you are considering how to go about designing the most efficient transition? Well, the first, I think, is the design of your tile. And by that, I mean, it should be a really bright and easily identifiable, lurid color and design. And the reason for that is you're going to come out of that swim and you will have no bandwidth. You are totally focused. It's like fight or flight mode. All the things in the rest of your life are all forgotten about, and you are just focused on, where's my bike, where's my bike, where's my bike? So if you can have a really bright towel on the ground next to your bike, it will be luring you towards where your bike actually is. So use it as a kind of way to signal. So get yourself a really loud towel. Next thing is, are you going to have pinned numbers, and numbers will be presented to you, and probably safety pins will be available, or are you going to go with a race belt? And remember, the rules of the race are going to be that you'll have to have a number on your front for the run and on your back for the bike. And I think trying not to have two garments to take on and take off is really useful. So if you have a tri-suit, a race belt works really well with that. And the one-piece and two-piece decision on a tri-suit can be important here, because actually in the swim, it's possible to be wearing your race belt with your race number quite up your chest and tucked up, so that you can actually swim with that under the upper piece of your tri-suit. And then once you come out, you can just kind of drag it down and have it present out, and it's ready to go. So it's already on at that point. So decide whether you want to have a race belt or not. Next thing is going to be about the pedals you have. So if you have flat pedals or cage pedals, then you're well set, because you can wear the same shoes to cycle and run in. And so that's going to take a whole shoe change thing out of the equation. And if you have clipless pedals, you'll have a more efficient way of cycling, which is perhaps more powerful and more effective. But you will probably need to have bike and run shoes to work with. If you are a person who's new to the sport, you have a super advantage by just being on flat pedals. You won't have to muck about with a shoe change. So particularly your T2 time, when you're already wearing your run shoes after you come off the bike, should be amazing. So you can have a really top end time by being very new to the sport, which is great, really. Yeah. So next question is, what are you going to wear? So we talked about the tri-suit already. Is it one piece or two piece? That's a kind of a comfort design thing. But the two piece gives you that little bit of an edge about having using the race belt underneath your top. Then if you're not doing that, then it could be a swimming costume, and then you'll need to have some cycle gear. So you'll need to bring the cycle gear into be able to put on your towel on your space in transition. Are you going to wear socks? Now, that sounds like a crazy question, but actually I think probably most elites, when we're looking at the Olympics, etc., are not remotely thinking about socks, and they've managed their feet in such a way that their feet are used to running in bare feet within their shoes. And their feet will have kind of grown accustomed to that. And that's why we did this presentation at this point, was to give you enough time to be able to practice that. That's not something to do at the last minute. It's something that you should be introducing into your training, so that your feet are kind of used to it. It's much easier from the get-go to be able to cycle in bare feet. And to be honest, it's usually so wet at the triathlon that your feet are soaked anyway. So there's very little point in having socks on for the bike. Maybe if you are wearing socks, you practice on any turbo sessions, for example, wearing no socks during your bike turbo sets, but maybe socks for the run. So next up would be the kind of handlebars that you would have. So if you have mountain bike or road bike with dropped handlebars, then you probably will put your helmet and race belt onto the towel on the ground. Whereas if you're on aero bars, which can actually be clip-on ones on a road bike, rather than integrated ones necessarily, but you can put if you do have aero bars of any description, you can put your race belt down first and then your helmet on top. So that can be set up in that way. In the picture, you saw some people had road bikes with, or mountain bikes even with the handlebars and a helmet attached. That's quite risky in a very confined transition, in the sense that the people are going to be coming frantically out. No one's going to care about your helmet if it gets knocked off that and kind of kicked around. The guy who knocked it off is not going to come back to pick it up for you. So it's going to be safer. It's going to be where you left it, probably, if it's on the towel. Okay, the next thing to think about is, where is my nutrition going? And I think if you have a race belt, try and choose a race belt that has loops on it, where you can put gels. You're not going to need a lot of nutrition for this race, because at most it's going to be 2.5 hours. But you will need some, and some will be very helpful, even if it's just from the psychology of having something sweet and that kind of boost, or something caffeinated with with an hour to go kind of thing. So definitely that's a nice crossover. So maybe gels on a race belt if you've got it, but also you'll probably do most of your fueling on the and eating, most of your fueling or eating on the bike. So having a bento box, which is just a little box that sits, a fabric box often, that sits in front of your steering tube, and nice and neatly tucked in there, is we'll take a couple of gels and that'll be absolutely fine. Old school is to just use some duct tape and put your gels onto your top tube. You get 2 or 3 in there easily, and they're very close to hand that way, which is fine. And of course, any sports drink or water or electrolytes or whatever, fluids, etc., on your down tube or your seat tube. So those are decisions you're going to have to take, is how are you going to fuel and where are you going to put it? Race belts are great for that. And think of your bike as a cafe, and eat lots on your bike. So next thing is about laces. So laces are a real time suck, a bit like socks. If you have to kind of sit down and do up your laces and etc., it's time consuming. So there are elastic laces, which I think are very helpful, and actually really good if you're kind of widening out the tongue of your shoe, because your feet are wet or something, and to get them back into your shoe. So that can work really well. So you've got a choice to take there as to whether it's going to be elastic laces or conventional. And when is the last time I can pee? I can't emphasize that enough. You do not want to be on your way out of the pool and ducking into the loo halfway down the pool. Get all that done before you start your swim, etc., so that this is a continuous process, and not interrupted by anything, any cause of nature. Okay, so those are the choices in front of you. So let's figure out about the pre-steps. So we want to make this day be as stress-free as possible for you. You want to have fun on all of this. So let's get the planning dead right. So before you arrive, so this is the day before, let's say the Saturday before the race, have chosen your towel, your really psychedelic 1960s fluorescent towel, so that you have that ready. Get yourself a checklist. If you have a D2I system on your bike, if you're privileged enough to have that, make sure you've charged it up. Why would you have that expensive a bike and then be stuck on one gear? So please make sure it's fully charged. Likewise with your watch and your heart rate monitors, and take the time to set up multi-sport. Chances are, if it's your first triathlon, you won't know how to set up your Garmin so that it clicks through for swim, bike, run. So don't spend time in transition going, oh, with my watch. Just know how that works and practice it beforehand. Bike computer fully charged. A key thing, which is probably worth your while, having got this far on this presentation, is check the bolts on your bike shoe cleats. Nearly always there's one that's loose. So check the tension on those. Clean your chain. If you have go faster tires, put those on. Pack up your transition bag, ticking off the things on your list. Cut your toenails, particularly if you have socks. It'll be very hygienic for the person behind you on the swim, of course. But if you also don't want your toenails catching on your socks if you're using them and losing time that way. Put your gels onto your race belt and do that now. That can be footery and you're going to be nervous tomorrow morning, so get it done the day before. And whatever you're planning, plan to arrive in plenty of time so you're unrushed and you are a Zen-like triathlete of calm. Okay, great. So that's day before stuff, all right? So now you have arrived on, and you're in the car park, wherever you're parking. So the key question is, okay, I've got here and I have my children in the car and I've bounced around my beautiful bike and trees clubbed into it from the side of the road, etc. So does my bike still work? So please take your bike off out of your car, check that the brakes are not rubbing. You do not want to have your bike in transition with the brake blocks rubbing against the wheel. It's 19 Ks long enough without making it harder than it needs to be. So check that both wheels are moving freely. Inflate your tires to the right pressure. So if you have a track pump, now's a good time to use it. Take the bike for just a spin. Take it out of the car park and down the road a little bit, and move index through all your gears, and make sure everything's working just fine. And now you can be comfortable about that. Put on your watch, put on the sports drink, assemble your sports drink and put it onto the frame. And be nice to your bike, cuddle your bike, reassure your bike. This is going to be an important part of your day. So look at it and think, wow, this is beautiful, and appreciate it. Okay, so it's now your bike works. Your bike is partially dressed actually at this point, and you're going to take all the rest of the stuff with you to transition, to register. So what have you got in your transition bag that you're taking with you? Well, the rest of the stuff that you need to dress your bike. So your towel's going in there, talcum powder is going in there, Vaseline, run shoes with socks, potentially, bike shoes with socks, bike computer, race belt, of course, with the nutrition attached. If it's, I've never actually experienced snow in late September, but it's going to happen, I guess, at some point. So think about what what severe weather could be, and you don't need to make it miserable on that bike. So if rain is horizontal, then maybe you need another layer on top of your tri-suit. And the flip side of that, as unlikely as it seems, you might want to have sunglasses, sunblock, or a sun cap. Okay, so those are the kind of things that should be in your transition bag that you're going to need to have in transition. So let's go and imagine now we've registered and we are at our location where we're going to rack our bike. So we're at the right, the rack space, and put your rear wheel into the grips so that the handlebars are facing you. And when you're dressing your bike, you want to be sure that you have a toolkit, and that toolkit's going to have a couple of inner tubes if you're really unlucky, the tire levers to be able to fix the puncture, and a multi-tool, probably good idea as well. Not much point having the inner tubes if you can't fill them. So pump on your bike or the CO2 cylinders and inflator, and know how to use that. So if you just recently bought it, and I happen to put my hand up here and say I bought non-screw-in CO2 cylinders, but the applicator was a screw-in applicator, so it was completely useless. So I bought the wrong things because it had been so long since I'd used them. So make sure that that these things are compatible and that they work, and you know how to use them. Your bike computer, as we've said, should be charged, but now you should be fitting it. Your sports drink should already be on your bike if you're using any. The bento box now, fit it if you're using one. And then the two final things here, one obligatory. So think about the gear that you're going to need the bike to be in order when you cross the mount line. So that's a flat mount line, but you're trying to clip in and you're going to be, you can't accelerate massively, even if it's flat, because you've got the junction coming up. So maybe it's the big gear at the front, but quite an easy gear on the rear sprocket. So make sure it's in that right gear as opposed to being something that's too easy or something that's too hard. And again, you can be practicing that. So, and you can anticipate what that's going to be like and know how that feels to be in that gear. So practice it and be sure your bike is in the bike rack, in the right gear, ready to go. Okay, and then if you're flying squirrel, if you've got if you're anticipating a running mount, then you might want to think about having your bike shoes already clipped into pedals and elastic banded onto the bike in a horizontal position and prepped for that. But that might be an advanced technique. Okay, so we've dressed our bike, and now we move on to the sequence of dressing the towel. So the towel, if I get this right, so we want to dress our towel in reverse order of how we're going to need the stuff on the towel. So the last thing you're going to need is going to be your run shoes. So in this example, we have a nice bright towel that could attract us to our transition spot, nice and red and unique. Probably not anyone else is going to have that same towel. And we have put our run shoes far away on the edge of that towel. Notice the talcum powder everywhere. And notice that the laces are open, and these are not elastic laces, they're just conventional laces, but they're open, and the tongue is ready to be able to be as wide as possible to get your feet in, so that your feet are going to slip easily into that. Notice that your socks, if you're using them, should be kind of scrunched up and opened out so that you can put your two thumbs in, kind of thing, and put those on your feet. And actually, with a sock and shoe combination, you shouldn't be afraid to think about sitting down to do that, because that actually may be quicker in principle, rather than kind of hopping about and balancing on one leg, particularly if people are whizzing around you and it's a bit kind of frantic. So something to think about is how efficiently can you put that on. Elastic laces help because it's just kind of one movement in comparison to conventional laces. So there you go. Have the next step to add here then is bike shoes. So bike shoes would be closer to you because you're going to need them first. Put your race belt down in the way that you will pick it up. So this one, for example, is upside down, so that I just grab the clips and it's ready to go on. And you can see the gels are already in the loops here. The bike shoes, it's exactly the same idea. The talc into the shoe to help ease it in, and also underneath that the flaps are opened up so they're really wide. Now, another trick here, and why you brought the Vaseline, is to smear some Vaseline around the heels of each of those. Not very much, just enough. After you have put the talc on, just smear a little Vaseline on it, and also a little bit under the tongue. And if you're running sockless, then use a little bit of Vaseline up into the toe box of your run shoes. Not very much, just enough to kind of help it be easy. Okay. And then the next thing to add in here is the helmet. And you'll notice the helmet goes down in a specific way, which is the way that you would want to pick it up. So imagine it's just a lid, and it's a simple movement of your arms to just go straight up and over your head. And then the clips are off to the side, so they're ready for you to be able to kind of clip in. So you could even grab it by the clips to kind of help to put over your head, kind of thing. And if you had sunglasses, they could be on the outside of the helmet, or they could be sitting inside the helmet just here. But you can see that we've done this in the order in which we need the things, and it's very simple. Okay. Now, one of the values of the towel and how the towel rewards you is that it can fold over. So if it's torrential rain, you can take the towel and just use it as one layer and then kind of fold it over so that at least it's defending your running shoes and your socks if you're using socks. So it has the ability to be able to do that. There's a precious little point in trying to defend your bike shoes from rainfall. They're just going to get soaked instantly anyway. So, and the other aspect of this is don't be afraid to actually step onto, you're coming out of the pool and you're wet. So you can use the towel to stand on. It'll help dry your feet a little bit, and the soles of your feet in particular. Now, in this example, we have the advantage of the aero bars. So if we've aero bars of any description, then hope you can see in the picture that the race belt is across the aero bars and kind of dangling down, and the helmet is being nestled in the aero bars themselves. So that gives you, and that's obviously sitting up, etc. So it's very quick to be able to pick that up, and it gives us a very small footprint of what we would have on the ground on the tile, and more space on the tile to dry your feet when you arrive. Okay, so if we then have flat pedals, you have a very straightforward, if you're on a mountain bike or on a road bike, etc., with flat pedals or a pedal cage, then you only have one set of shoes, and it would look something like this. So very much simpler, but exactly the same layout for the other stuff. Okay, so that's a sense of how you would dress your tile. And so it can end up being very minimalistic, which is great, because one of the things we're going to discuss is about not assuming that the way you set this up is the way you're going to find it again when you come back out from the swim. Okay, so next part I want to talk about here is the idea of practicing and what you can be doing right now in order to help you prepare for the event itself. So what I would urge you to do, to Triathlon Club, we love triathlon, we love the individual sports, and I want you to take from this that you should love the skill set, and that the transition offers you some really interesting skills to master. So why not commit to the gliding dismount at the very least? So if we're talking about a gliding dismount, it's when we're coming back in, we're coming south from and approaching transition from T2. So we're getting off the bike and we're preparing to run. So for example, the way that might work is as follows. So let's say with 350 meters to go until that left turn off the A816 and onto the access road that maybe 20-25 meters or something, that's going to take you into transition. With maybe 350 meters to go, drop 2 gears and increase your cadence. And that's just really good practice from the perspective of spinning your legs out a little bit to get them ready for the run. So just increase your cadence a little bit. And as you do that and spinning your legs out, reach down and free up, say, your right foot shoe. So let it come back up to 12 o'clock and take the flap of your shoe, the Velcro flap of your shoe, and release your foot from the shoe and place your foot on top of the pedal, keeping the shoe clipped in, but your foot on top of the pedal. So then you can actually pedal like that with one foot clipped in and the other foot resting on the shoe. And then after a couple of turns of the pedal, I mean, remember you're slowing down here as you're approaching the junction to turn left, then do the same for your left foot, so that by the time you go round that left turn, both of your feet are resting on the shoes and the shoes are in the pedals. Once you get round the corner, and you've got 20 meters now, so you know it's 10 seconds or something, then swing your right leg over the bike behind you and put it kind of behind your left leg, and as you glide and slow down and approach that dismount line, you just step off. I say just step off. You'll need to practice this. The video is on the website, Triathlon Club Facebook page. So go and have a look at that. But that is it feels great to be able to do it, and there's really no reason why you can't be practicing this on every time you're using your bike. So whenever you're coming off the bike in training, try using this. So the gliding dismount is something to really go for, and is a lovely skill to be able to bring to this triathlon in September. Okay, another skill, it sounds like a basic skill, but running with the bike, just using the saddle to control. So kind of upright stance. And the second video on the club Facebook web page will show you how to do that. But you can run with the saddle in transition if it's safe to be able to do so, or you might want to hold the saddle and the front of the handlebar. But getting good with running with the bike is a good way to do that. A good skill to be able to have. Then the next thing, which I think is really essential here, is practice the bricks. So bricks are a phrase when there's a combination of two of the three disciplines. So it could be a swim bike brick, but mostly it's a bike run brick. So in your training, at least once a week from now through to the event, be running off the bike. And that doesn't mean, you know, bike and then sandwich shower and then run. It means you run straight off. So actually set up your transition in the way you've seen on the in the presentation, at home if you're coming off a turbo, or wherever it is that you park your bike if it's out in the world, and come back and change into your run shoes and just go straight. And you know, even if that's just 15 minutes, it's going to help you no end to get used to that kind of wobbly legs feeling that you have for like 8 or 9 minutes into the run. So and of course you have the whole ability to be able to practice your gliding dismount as you're prepping for that. So get into kind of a race set mindset in your training, and to be developing these skills. Okay, then there was an advanced aspect of this, which is the flying squirrel, or the moving mount. And one of the second video on the club Facebook site shows you how to do that. The key is how you land on your saddle, and so you definitely want to practice that, or it can be unpleasant. Then you've got the ability to be sockless on your bike, and be practicing that. And you may, if you don't do that already, you may find it much easier and not unpleasant to do that. If it's a sockless run, then you definitely don't want to be going out for a 10K run having never done that before. So you can tag it, something to tag on to the end of a run. You could be on a 10K run, for example, but the last 500 meters of that training run, you could do that sockless, for instance. Or you could add an extra, you could do your 10K run and then add an extra 500 meters or something, and then just be gradually extending the amount of time that you're sockless so that your feet get used to the pressure points in your run shoes. And you would want to prep your shoes in the way that we've described already. Yeah, and then we've got this idea of, so if that's been in training, then what about on the day? So you need as much of a rehearsal as you possibly can. So you're trying to develop a neural pathway really fast here in the time that you've got. So we've arrived and registered, and we've dressed our bike, and we've dressed our towel. And now what do we do? Well, we go now and we walk through what T1 will, the T1 experience, basically. So go to the junction, you know, the door out of the swim, and actually rehearse how you will approach where your bike is, visualize where it is down the row, look for your lurid towel as a kind of marker, and then use a mental rehearsal to kind of say, okay, when I get here, the first thing I do is, you know, I pick up my helmet, I fasten my helmet, I pick up my race belt, I fasten my race belt. I'm sitting down for the shoes, or not, standing up and doing my shoes, etc. And then visualize how you would take your bike, perhaps with a one hand on the handlebar and the other hand at the saddle, and what your route is to get to the mount line. Where on the mount line are you going to mount? Are you going to be on the inside? What does that mean? Are you going to be on the left side, on the right side, in the middle of that? It can get quite busy and congested in there, depending on your heat. So there can be a lot happening. If you're later on in the day, there'll be people coming back in through that. So it can feel complicated. So just figure out the line that you would like to take, and then visualize how you're going to mount and how you're going to get to that end junction. So are you going to be clipped in? Are you going to have your feet resting on pedals? So on shoes. So mentally rehearse how you're going to do all that, and do it twice. So go back again. So once, the first time is kind of discovery learning about, okay, how does this work? And then, okay, right, fine, I think I've got an idea. Now let me go back and do it again more fluently, so that you're kind of getting that embedded in your head. And then once that's sort of settled and you've got an idea of how to do that, go and do T2. So go to the mount line and imagine yourself coming in with the bike. How do you get to rack it? Visualize yourself racking it. Visualize yourself fastening your helmet, putting your helmet off, putting it down, and what you're doing next. So if you have flat pedals, you'll just go at that point, remembering to turn your race belt round, although the marshals will probably help you with that if you forget. And if you are changing shoes, imagine how you're going to do that. Are you going to sit down to do that? If you have to put socks on and so on and so forth, what's your method going to be like that? Work it through, and then again, you've done one which is exploring how you're going to do it. So then go back and rehearse it in the way more fluently, etc., to try and help it bed in. And then at that stage, you've done all you can do, really. You've done marvelously from trying to help get yourself through the chaos that might ensue. Okay, so pretty much near the end here, and I think for me, one of the things I think is really important to do that's related to the acquisition of skills is how you are going to feel at the end of this race. So it's very common for people to have outcome goals, which is maybe there's a placing that you would like to have. Maybe you want to win your age group for this triathlon, or maybe there's a time that you're looking for. And that's one way to set a kind of goal and have an aspiration for the race. But there's sub goals to that, which are called process goals. So learning and acquisition of some skills along the way would be an example of a process goal. So you could decide that you're already going to be successful in this whole approach, regardless of where you place or what happens, or if you got a puncture. It would still be a really great day if you were able to cope with and achieve some of these process goals. So, I mean, just in each of the next weeks leading up to the event, actually doing a brick session, a bike run brick session done in training would be a brilliant example of a process goal that's really going to stand to you and help you regardless of what happens on the day. Actually being really well prepared the night before so that you're not stressed on the day, that you're turning up really legitimately as the little triathlete of CAM or the very large triathlete of CAM. So that's just no hassle. It's just of ease. You can predict that it's going to be a stressy time. So why add to it? Let's take the time and allocate maybe 2 hours the day before for prep that actually has a benefit that carries off into the next day. So that would be a process goal. Being so relaxed in transition because of your prep and knowing exactly where things are going and how that could be because you've got a little checklist or something, and you were there early and you practiced this because this is how you set it up in your brick sessions. That would be a process goal. So you could feel great already before the triathlon even starts. You've learned and you've applied and you've kind of made things more enjoyable for you in the process. Then you can go to things like mastering the gliding dismount, or running with, running really well through transition with controlling your bike really well. Maybe for you, it'll be about being courageous enough to go for clipless pedals for the first time and actually allowing yourself to feel that up pull on the pedal as you go through. Maybe it's about being sockless, just to experience what that's like, or elastic laces. So there can be, for you, to make up some process goals that are going to be things that you can achieve that are regardless of whether or not your time is fantastic. Some of those things are uncontrollable. You can't determine who shows up in order to, you can get Alistair Brownlee or Alex G can turn up, and I think you're probably not going to win your age group race if you're the same age as them and male. Right, some don'ts then. Please don't waste time by eating or drinking or taking a selfie or texting somebody, etc. So take transition seriously. You might win a cabbage or a haddock or parts of a lamb. Oftentimes there's been awards for the fastest T1 and T2, and those are available to you if this is even your first triathlon. That's one of the joys of the Mid-Argyll Triathlon. It's so friendly and accessible, so you can do brilliantly if you score on this. And remember, if you're on flat pedals, your T2 time should be fabulous because you don't have shoes to put on. So that's a real distinct possibility. The other thing to don't do is not just about wasting time, but please don't assume because you're the little triathlete of CAM, you've come really early and you've got all your gear together and you've gone back to your car and left all your stuff off and you're being really mindful, etc. Don't assume that the way you last saw your towel is the way that it's set up. So other people will have come in, there's bikes across from you, there's bikes behind you, whatever. And other people are funneled in terms of their own situation and they're stressed. So you can't expect them to look out for your stuff. So make a point before transition closes of going back and making sure everything is the way that you thought it was, including, by the way, that your you know, your tires are still inflated, that something awful hasn't happened and you've got a, you know, flat tire already, which happens a lot actually, perhaps in warmer climates. But yeah, don't take it for granted that transition is the way that you last saw it. Okay. Next, a point about bike envy. Just from when you look around inside transition, everybody will have a more expensive bike than you. It just is it's a law of triathlon. Everybody will have better gear. Everybody will be thinner. Everybody will be better looking. Everybody will be more muscular. Everybody will seem healthier. Everybody will seem to know where their towel is, to use a phrase from the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. They don't. They won't. It's just your head, right? So please don't compare. You are an individual, and this is your day, and you want to have fun with it. So comparison is out the window. So when those thoughts come into your head, dismiss them. You are there to have fun and do the very best that you can for the level that you've been able to train at, given all of the other tectonic plates that are happening inside your life. So don't give in to comparison and don't worry about it. Your race is just as legitimate as anybody else's. Okay, so next thing, if you're working on process goals, then just running, whatever else happens, just running in elastic laces is progress. So, you know, celebrate those achievements in process goals, and you'll already have won the day before you even start if you do that well. And whatever happens, it's about movement. It's about being with really lovely people. It's about smiling and enjoying the opportunity that's presented by the triathlon. So celebrate it regardless. If you get a flat tire, it's God's way of making you be more aware of tire changing capability for future races. So please just let it be fun and have a good time. So nothing negative gets to happen in that space. All right, then. So if there's anybody still left, what we've been talking about is arrive early, have a list, have a plan, and pre-practice. Pick what your process goals are going to be and practice the hell out of them so that you get mastery inside those things. And then if there's new skills that you get to apply, brilliant. If there's new techniques that you want to apply, do not leave it till race day. Go and decide on what those things are going to be. If you're going to try a race belt for the first time, go get yourself a race belt with loops, by the way, with loops, and be using that now, so it's second nature by the time you get round to the triathlon. Of course, know where your towel is. So have a lurid towel, and keep everything as minimal and as organized as possible. And whatever you do, keep smiling, and just know that regardless of where you finish up, whatever happens on the day, you're wonderful anyway. All right, enjoy.